A billionaire's morning run through the city park was supposed to be routine until he stumbled upon a sight that stopped him cold. A homeless black girl crouched beside his young daughter, tracing letters in the dirt with a stick. Her clothes were torn, her eyes bright with intelligence, her voice calm and certain as she explained concepts most adults would struggle to teach. Strangers passing by barely looked at her, some even muttering under their breath, dismissing her as invisible. But there was something about her quiet determination, something that felt bigger than chance. Who was this child, and how could someone so gifted be left on the streets? The answer would change everything. But first, please make sure to subscribe the channel and comment below from which city you are watching this video. Jonathan Avery was the kind of man people whispered about when he entered a room, a self-made billionaire who built a global tech empire from a cramped apartment. His life ran on precision. Mornings began with a pre-dawn jog through the manicured trails near his gated estate, followed by carefully scheduled meetings, investment calls, and lavish charity events that reinforced his image as a modern philanthropist. Money insulated him from nearly every discomfort. At home, his world revolved around 8-year-old Claire, a curious child with a love for books and an endless stream of questions. Jonathan adored her, yet their lives existed inside a protective bubble. Private tutors, exclusive clubs, and a security team that kept the outside world at a polite distance. But the city surrounding their estate told a different story. Only a few miles away, neglected neighborhoods bore the scars of poverty and racial injustice that wealth couldn't hide. Jonathan noticed them from the tinted windows of his car, fleeting images he never paused to confront. That morning's jog was supposed to be another unremarkable start to a predictable day. Instead, it led him toward an encounter that would shatter the neat boundaries of his privilege and force him to face the realities he'd long ignored. Something or someone was about to challenge everything he thought he understood about success, opportunity, and what it truly means to care. Jonathan slowed as he neared the playground, his breath clouding in the chilly air. Claire had run ahead, chasing a stray soccer ball, when he spotted her crouched beside a girl who couldn't have been more than 10 or 11. The child's hair was matted, her clothes threadbare, and a worn backpack lay at her feet. Yet she moved with an unexpected calm, tracing neat rows of numbers and letters in the dirt, while Claire followed every stroke with wide-eyed fascination. At first, Jonathan assumed the girl was simply playing, but the longer he watched, the clearer it became. She was teaching. Complex fractions and unfamiliar words poured from her lips with a quiet authority, her voice carrying the weight of someone far older. He stepped closer, curious and unsettled. A man walking his dog paused and sneered. "Doesn't belong here," he muttered loudly enough for Jonathan to hear. The girl flinched, but kept her focus on the lesson. Another passerby shook her head in disapproval, muttering something about keeping the park clean. Jonathan felt a prickle of discomfort. This wasn't idle disapproval, it was sharp, targeted. He recognized the tone, contempt dressed as civility. When Claire looked up, her face bright with excitement, Jonathan noticed the subtle shift around them. A security guard from a nearby cafe approached, his hand resting on his belt. "Park rules," he barked, barely glancing at Jonathan. "No loitering. Move along." His eyes lingered on the girl's dark skin and frayed shoes, dismissing her with a single glance. Jonathan's instinct was to speak, but the guard's stare made him hesitate. The girl stood slowly, backpack clutched tight. "We're not hurting anyone," she said softly, but her voice wavered. The guard stepped closer. "Rules are rules," he said, sharper now. Claire protested, "She's helping me." Her small voice carried across the path, drawing the attention of other walkers. Some slowed to watch, their expressions a mix of curiosity and quiet approval of the guard's actions. Not one offered to help. Jonathan felt a surge of anger, at the guard, at the onlookers, at himself. He could end this with a word, flash his wealth and status, but something deeper held him back. This wasn't just about a park rule. It was the kind of moment he'd spent years ignoring, a truth hiding in plain sight. The girl's eyes met his, steady and unblinking. There was no plea, only a quiet resilience that cut through the morning chill. Jonathan opened his mouth to speak when a voice crackled over the guard's radio. "Need backup at the east entrance. Possible trespass. Backup. For a child teaching math in the dirt." Jonathan's pulse quickened. Around them, the small crowd shifted, phones coming out, some recording, others whispering. The guard's hand tightened on his belt. Jonathan realized this was no longer a quiet morning in the park. It was a test, a mirror held to his comfortable life, demanding a response. And as the radio hissed again, a second guard rounded the corner, the tension in the air thick enough to taste. What Jonathan chose to do next would decide more than the fate of a morning run. It might decide what kind of man he truly was. The park seemed to shrink as the second guard strode toward them, his boots crunching on the gravel like a warning. Jonathan's heart pounded in his ears. Claire clung to his arm, her small fingers trembling, but the girl stood motionless, shoulders squared against the weight of every stare. "Step back," the first guard ordered, voice sharp with authority. "This area's for residents and paying guests. You need to leave now." His gaze never left the girl, as if Jonathan and Claire were invisible. Jonathan stepped forward. "She's with us," he said, but the words fell thin against the hostility pressing in. The second guard's hand hovered near his radio. "Doesn't matter. She can't stay." A murmur swept through the onlookers, phones raised higher, whispers cutting like static. Some nodded in agreement, others filmed in silence, but no one intervened. The girl's chin lifted, eyes fierce despite the fear flickering beneath. Jonathan felt a surge of shame and fury. All his money, all his influence, and he was still watching a child be treated like a threat because of the color of her skin. He moved between the guards and the girl, his voice rising. "You will not touch her." The first guard stepped closer, inches away. "Sir, you're obstructing security protocol." "Protocol?" Jonathan's voice cracked like a whip. "Your protocol is racism, and you know it." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The crowd went still. Even the birds seemed to pause. The girl's eyes glistened, but she did not look away. For the first time, the guards faltered, their confidence slipping as Jonathan squared his shoulders, his stance unyielding. "Call the police if you want," he said, each word deliberate. "But understand, this ends now." The guards exchanged a look, the tension electric. The second one lowered his hand from the radio. The first hesitated, jaw tight, before finally stepping back. Jonathan turned to the girl, his chest heaving. In that moment, the park no longer felt like neutral ground. It was a battlefield, and the fight for what was right had only just begun. Silence settled over the park, heavy and unforgettable. The guards, faces tight with frustration, finally turned away, their radios crackling as they disappeared into the trees. The small crowd scattered, some lowering their phones, others avoiding eye contact as if embarrassed by what they had witnessed. Jonathan exhaled, the tension in his chest slowly breaking. He knelt to meet the girl's steady gaze. Her name, he learned, was Maya, 11 years old, brilliant at math, and homeless since her mother's sudden death. She carried everything she owned in that single frayed backpack. No one had stepped forward to help her before today. Claire reached out, slipping her tiny hand into Maya's, a simple gesture that said more than any speech Jonathan could give. In that moment, the distance between their worlds, one of privilege and one of struggle, felt painfully small. Jonathan knew he couldn't undo the cruelty she'd endured or the years of systemic injustice that kept children like Maya invisible. But he could no longer pretend those barriers were someone else's problem. That night, he arranged housing, tutoring, and support for Maya and others like her. It wasn't charity, it was responsibility. Weeks later, Jonathan watched Maya stand in front of a classroom, solving equations faster than her teachers. Yet the memory of that morning remained sharper than any success, the way strangers had looked at a child and seen only a threat. How many other Mayas are out there, brilliance buried under prejudice, waiting for someone to notice? How many times do we walk past, thinking it's not our fight? Racism doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in rules and glances, in who is welcome and who is warned away. The question isn't whether it exists. The question is what we will do the next time we see it standing in front of us.